name is John J. Hogan Jr. and I was born in Lynn, Massachusetts, June 10th, 1934.
Okay. And what was your childhood like growing up in the Great Depression?
Well, my mother and father were divorced, so I mainly lived in several homes growing up. I lived in the Hant with supposedly an aunt, and then I lived with my grandmother, Nana and Grampy Hunt, off and on in between homes. I lived in Point Pines, Revere. I went to the Lincoln School there, I think in probably the second grade, maybe the third. I lived with the brothers, that was a live-in, with the brothers and the nuns for maybe a year. And again, I never advanced, I just kept going back and forth, second, third grade. And then I probably went, it's crazy because I went to Norwood. I lived in Norwood with some people out there, and I met my sister Joyce out there.
Mm-hmm.
And she lived there for a short time, and they took her away. Oh, before I went to Norwood, I lived in Point of Pines, like I said, and Joyce lived there too, and my brother Jimmy was born. Now I was about 7 years old. That's when I went to Norwood. My brother Jimmy stayed there with Joyce, and then they didn't want Joyce either, and she came out to Norwood with me. And they kept Jimmy because they wanted the baby. And but they couldn't handle Joyce, so she was taken out and put somewhere else. But I think I ran away from Norwood, and I went back to my grandmother, Nana and Grampy Hunt. But then my mother put me somewhere else. Oh, that's when I went in the nuns and the brothers. And I don't even know where that was, because you couldn't leave the building. You slept in a dormitory upstairs. You went to school 7 days a week unless you had visitors on Sunday. Yeah. And somehow, the next thing I remember, I lived in Everett, and I went to the Immaculate Conception School in Everett, and that's when I met my brother. He was he was about 5 years old. I forgot I had a brother.
Wow.
Yeah, so for 4 years I didn't see him. And yeah, we got to know him there. I have pictures of him. And I can remember, that was 1945. How I remember that is because I remember I was outside of the house and a woman come yelling out of the house, "The president died, the president is dead." President Roosevelt, he died in 1945. That's how I remember the year that we lived there in Everett. And yeah, we left there and we went back to Lynn, where I bumped around. The first school in Lynn, I remember, was in the first grade. What was the name of that school? But it was an old school, and we were moving from that school to the Conry School, the brand new school. And I was living with my grandmother at the time, Nana Hunt and Grampy Hunt. I went to the Conry School in Lynn, West Lynn. And then I only went there a short time, and then, I went out to all those other places I was talking about. And then going back to Lynn, I went to St. Mary's. Now, I was in St. Mary's in Lynn in the third grade and the sixth grade, I can remember, because I had the same nun, Sister Marie Williams. And when I was leaving there to go to Boston, she gave me all passing grades, which I didn't have. And that was in, so, it was and then when I got there, I only had a few weeks left in the 6th grade at that school. It was the Prince School on Newbury Street. And so I had to go to work up in Somerset Hotel in Maine. So I left school and they promoted me into the 7th grade. And when I got back in September, I was in the 7th grade. So I did. We stayed in Boston all that time. I didn't pass. Oh, I went into the 8th grade. I did pass the 7th grade. I went into the 8th grade, but I didn't pass the 8th grade. I stayed back. That's when I quit school. And I had to go to continuation school until I was 16. And that was the old Brandeis Vocational School, downtown Boston. And my first day there, I saw a kid come out of a classroom and I asked him, where do you go for the one? And he said, I just left. And he says to me, he takes a bottle of half a pint of 4 Roses. And you sign in and you leave, like I'm doing. So that day I spent the whole day at the school. The next Friday I went back. I was working at the Hotel Somerset as a busboy. And I asked one of the waiters to get me a half pint of 4 Roses. And I took it with me that morning. I put it on the desk in a paper bag, signed, and I left. Now after that, I never went back again. I got some of the kids on the corner. I gave them the half pint, gave them $2, and they went to school, signed my name, and that's how I, finished till I was 16. Yeah. And then I had my ups and downs for that following year. I turned 17, and I got in a fight. Actually, it was Air Force guys, me, Bobby Canberra, Bobby Purnell, and we got charged with assault and battery. And they told us to plead guilty, that we get probation. Well, I got 6 months down the island, Deer Island. So when I got out of there, I had tickets on me because the Youth Service Board owned me until I was 21. Now, in between what I told you is what I went to reform school as the first time the court sent me for running away from these homes. Mm-hmm. They sent me to reform school for a stubborn child up to Lyman School. And so I had to go back there to see the board. And I was sitting outside and I'm listening to them. And this one woman said, I don't think he's learned his lesson. I think he should go to Concord till he's 21. Oh, I heard that. So there's this kid, Katz, who was, now we're 17 years old. We don't belong in reform school, Lyman School, because that's juvenile. We're 17 now. But we had to go back to the Youth Service Board. That's where they met. So the next morning, that night, him and I organized a riot in the mess hall so we could get out. And we got out. We went out through the kitchen, through the pantry window, and me and this other kid from Southie, the 3 of us got out. And we were down into Framingham, went up on the street, and we saw the police car. We ran. This kid from Southie got caught. Me and this kid, Katz, we got away. And we got back into Boston. And I never saw him again. And then I'm in the store, and my sister Joyce told my mother, and then they came in. And I turned myself back in and went back, got released to my grandfather, Grampy Hunt, who lived in Lynn. When my grandmother died, he remarried, and I stayed with him. And I was only there a week, and I got a job at the car wash in Lynn. And at the end of the day, when they're doing the tips, I said, well, where's my share? You're a new guy, you don't get them until, you know. And I started a little argument with the one kid there, the head honcho. And he started to give me some beef, and I got in a fight with him. The owner fired me. So now I don't have a job. But I'm lying to my grandfather and my step-grandmother. And she got mad because she's making my lunch, found out I wasn't working. And my mother came, and I broke away from the kitchen where they were talking and just took off. Went back to Boston. And I went to my Aunt Josephine's, my Auntie Joe, and Uncle Mac, and my cousin Eileen. And I stayed up there at 9 Deer Park in West Lynn. Then they told my mother where I was. So rather than turn me back in, I went up to my stepfather's brother, who was a recruiting sergeant up in New Hampshire. And so I went up there with Josephine and my mother and Joe. And he said, well, all right, no problem, we'll get you in the Army here. He says, you were never arrested in New Hampshire, were you? I says, well, just once. Me and Earl Dasses, we broke into a store and we got caught. Thumbing home with this stuff in a box. So, and we got 2 years suspended sentence from there. And so he said, oh, geez. He said, well, where were you born? I was born in Lynn. Because all my arrests were in Boston. And he said, were you ever arrested in Lynn? No. He said, well, he pointed at my Aunt Josephine and says, you take him, you're his guardian. You go down to the police station, see the police chief, tell him you're the guardian and he's going to go in the Army and you're signing for him. And that's how I did it. So I went down to the police station, met with the police chief, because he had to sign the papers to go in the Army. And he said, well, where'd you go to school? I said, St. Mary's. And he said, oh, I went to St. Mary's. And he said, well, who'd you have? I said, well, I had Sister Marie Williams in the 3rd and the 6th grade. Oh, I had her too, you know, in such and such a grade. He wished me luck, because, I told him I was going airborne. And I volunteered to go to Korea. So he wished me good luck, and now I had to stay. My date to report in South Boston Army Base to go to Fort Devens was like the 2nd of January. Now this is in December of 69. So I just had to lay low, not get, nobody, because there's still warrants out for me. And I went into Fort Devens for 2 or 3 days, got uniforms, went to Fort Dix, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And I had to go 8 weeks in New Jersey, basic training. But because I was going to airborne, I had to go another 8 weeks for heavy weapons. So I did 16 weeks basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. I had 4 days delayed on route to get down to Fort Benning, Georgia. I took my 3 weeks jump training there. Then I had 7 days delayed on route to go to Oakland, California. But I went back to Boston to see my mother and my family. And I went to Oakland, California. And I was there, I don't know, 5, 6 days. And they gave us all kind of gear. to go to down to the pier in Oakland and get aboard the ship. And we boarded the ship, and the USO people, they were giving us coffee and donuts and before we boarded. And then we got aboard the ship, and we spent 14 days on that troop ship going over to Yokohama, Japan.
So just circle back. So when you went to boot camp in Fort Dix, what was that like? Just
At Fort Dix, we had a Korean War platoon sergeant. He had just got back from Korea, and the section sergeant was a young kid, maybe 21. He was the tech sergeant. He just got back from Korea. And one was with the 2nd Division and one was with the 1st Cav. So they were mainly our guys all the way through the 16 weeks. And we trained heavy January, February. After about the 2nd month, we're out on the firing range, and it's cold and rainy, and I'm laying down in my poncho firing the M1. And I got a call to come back to the company, so I went back in a Jeep, and I reported to the clerk there, and he says, yeah, go ahead in. And I went into the company commander, gave him I took off my helmet, poncho, and left the rifle out, oddly wrong. I walked in and reported, Private Hogan reporting his orders, sir. And he says, I've been going through your records. He says, you're doing good. He says, there's a couple of gentlemen want to take you back to Boston. And I look over my shoulder, and there was 2 detectives, Schultz and Crawford. And I know who they were from Station 16. And, but he says, go back. Oh, he says, I see you going to Fort Benning, Georgia for jump training. I said, yes, sir. He says, it shows here you're volunteering to go to Korea. I said, yes, sir. And he says, oh, all right. He says, report back to your unit. I gave him a salute and a about face and walked out the door. And I heard him tell the 2 detectives, you're on federal property, and I'm giving you an hour to get off of my property. And that was about the only, contact I had with that. I had no other problems going through basic training, never heard from anybody. I shipped down, I finished basic training. We did the parade route and all that graduation stuff. And I was proud of myself because I never graduated from nothing. I never graduated from grammar school. Never finished it. But then I went down to Fort Benning, Georgia. I was with these kids on the plane. Some was from New Jersey. I think there was a kid from Boston. And there was these 2 colored kids that I got to know in basic training. And when we get down there, we get off the plane and we're running into the station. We're running into the station. And we both had to go to the men's room. So when we get to the men's room, we looked at each other. Well, he was a colored kid, black kid. And we looked at each other, and neither one of us knew what the hell to do. Because it said, whites only. Well, I had to go. I went into the men's room, and then when I come out, I didn't see him, so he must have found his bathroom. Now, we got on the bus, we didn't talk to each other. Now, this bus is on Fort Benning, Georgia. And as I'm looking out the window, I saw the swimming pool. And it said, whites only. This is government property. And I'm going back and I see water fountains, whites only. And I've never dealt with this before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, getting away from that, I reported in, went to a company, and we started training. The first week was mostly physical, PT. First week was the 40-foot tower. That was the big week. And then the second week was the 250 tower. And then the third week was, we made a jump on a Monday, a jump on a Tuesday, 2 jumps Wednesday, 1 jump Thursday, and graduated Friday.
Wow.
And then all this time we didn't talk. So now we had 7 days delayed en route to get to Oakland. So I went home to Boston, was very careful that I didn't let too many people see me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Oakland, California. And even there, when I met with these kids, we really weren't talking because of what happened at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I got there, I think it was a Saturday. And the orderly there said, "You're late reporting." I said, "Well, we had to change planes and mixed planes, and it took an extra couple of days to get out here." But then he said, "Well, nothing's going to happen here until Monday morning." So we went downtown in Oakland, flubbed around down there. I came back, we started processing, and then we got down on the ship, and we shipped over into Yokohama. And for 14 days, I was sick. I lived on Oreo cookies and Coca-Cola. Because every time it was a 24-hour food line. Every time I got down, I got a tray of food. I couldn't do it. And we got off the ship, and within hours, I was okay. We processed there, and then we got back on another ship and went over to Korea. We were only there like maybe a day on that to get to Korea. And then we were in the Repa Depot. We got weapons and this, that, and the other, and we got assigned to where we were going. Well, I got assigned being airborne to the only airborne outfit was the 187th Airborne. And I got into M Company, 3rd Battalion. So they put us on trucks and we went up, traveling. There was probably 14 or 16 in a 2.5-ton truck going up from the Repa Depot up to the line. And I reported into the company commander's bunker. I don't remember his name. And I was put in the mortar platoon. And I went up, I was in the 2nd squad. And I met the guys, in the bunker. And then the first day, all I did was, they were showing me the drill. I just sat up on top of the gun on sandbags, and I just watched them go through their routine on fire commands and what they do. Well, you had the gunner, assistant gunner, you had the base plate man, who was an ammo bearer, and everybody down from that were all ammo bearers. And me being the new guy, the new kid, I took a lot of resin because I'm fresh from basic training. And that night, my first night, now we pulled 2-hour duties on the gun. You're out there alone on the gun. Well, I put my helmet on and I had an M1 rifle at the time, and they put extra bandoliers or clips of ammo on me. They hung hand grenades on me like a Christmas tree. And I went out, oh, they gave me the password, and I went out to relieve the guy out on the gun. Well, when I got out there, I didn't know if he was asleep or not, but I said, gave the password and nothing. All he had on was his fatigues, and he had a 45 in his hand, leaning up against the sandbags. So he didn't say nothing. He just walked out, went, I'm there. That was my introduction. So I felt kind of dumb, but I stayed myself awake for 2 hours. Somebody relieved me and I went back to the bunker. But that was my first night up online. Yeah.
Where was this in Korea? Do you remember?
That I don't remember. Somewhere central on the 38th parallel. I don't know if we were in front of the 38th parallel or right on it. But we were only there not even 30 days, not even a month. And we rotated back to Japan. I went back to Japan. So I had it pretty easy. And we were there for months back in Japan. And then we went back to Korea. And then I remember where we were. We were in the Kumwa province on the Kumwa Ridge, in the valley, Kumwa Valley. We were on the ridge here and across, they were on the other ridge of the Kumwa Valley. But I remember that. And I remember during that time, I was on guard duty on the thing, and the squad leader's name was Sergeant Hale. Now I knew him back in Japan. I was in the company before him. He was a corporal coming over. They made him squad leader, he made staff sergeant. And then we went to Korea. And I was dozing, but he chewed me out. He said, stay awake, all that kind of stuff. And then he went back, he got a hold of the platoon leader, or second lieutenant. And he was a new lieutenant right out of West Point. So I was dozing, and I looked up, and there's the lieutenant, and now he had a witness that I was sleeping on guard. So they relieved me of duty, and they brought me back to the bunker. The next morning I went back to battalion, and I was going to be court-martialed for sleeping on duty during combat, in the combat situation. So I was back there, and a couple of hours later, a captain came in, and he asked, they were looking for volunteers. He says, to take a Jeep tonight up to the line. Well, I didn't want to be court-martialed, so I volunteered. Nobody else wanted to volunteer. There's about 8 of us in the tent. A lot of them other guys, they wanted out for whatever reason. I didn't care. But I didn't want to get a discharge. So I volunteered. So he took me outside the tent and he says, see that Jeep over there out in the middle of the field? Yeah. You're taking that Jeep up tonight. I said, okay. And he says, we're going to give you some Benadryl so you won't go to sleep. I'll shut it off. Yeah.
So they gave you benzos?
Yeah, he gave me a couple of bennies, and so he says, you take these at dusk. So I took them, and, you know, when the sun was going down. And then when it got dark, around 10 o'clock that night, he said, all right, so they escorted me over to the Jeep. I get in the Jeep, I said, well, who's going to be my shotgun rider? He said, no, you're going up alone. What the hell? Yeah, it's Beth.
Hello.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay. And they're briefing me. There was that same captain, and there was a couple of sergeants and a lieutenant, and they were briefing me that all checkpoints up to the line, you were gonna get waved through. You didn't have to check in, but you were gonna go up in 4-wheel drive all the way, even up at the mountainside. So, all right. I said, well, what am I taking up? He said, see those 2 5-gallon cans? Yeah. He said, you're taking them up to L Company. I think it was L Company. I said, oh, okay. I didn't question him what was in it. So, they said, all right, so they gave me a grease gun. So I had that on the seat. So I started off 4-wheel drive. I thought I'd never get, you know, not. But I hit the first checkpoint, and I noticed that the MPs were off the road about 20, 30 yards. And they said, M10? Yeah, M10. Waved me through. So then you're gonna go over this little bridge. Nobody was on the bridge. So I went over the bridge. Then I started making the incline. Then when a flare went up, I would stop because they had the windshield down with the canvas, everything muddied up, the headlights, nothing could shine. So when the flares went up, I would just put my head down and you would blend in with the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it went out, you just proceed again, going up. Well, I got up to L Company up on line, and a couple of the guys come over and they took the 2 5-gallon can. I said, now what was all the fuss about me bringing up these cans? He said, didn't they tell you what you were driving up? I said, no. He said, there's 2 tubes of nitroglycerin, 1 in each can. I said, oh, I didn't know what the hell I knew what nitroglycerin was, but I didn't realize how dangerous it was.
Yeah.
He said, why do you think you're riding alone and you volunteered?
Wow.
I said, that's it. So, all right. So you didn't have much space up there to turn the Jeep around, but I went down. Now, I'm okay now. I'm all set. I'm not going to get a court-martial. I'm back in good graces. But I was not proud, or I said, Jesus, I've never graduated from anything, and I want my honorable discharge.
Yeah.
I mean, my father was in the Army. He got an honorable discharge. No, he was still in the Army. He was a career man. So, but anyway, they kept me in the motor pool. I didn't want to stay in the motor pool. But I was doing the ammo runs and all, you know, every day making ammo runs up. So one day we're going up and they were being shelled. And on that little bridge, it was in the dry season. And there was a smoke screen. They smoke screened it so they wouldn't blow it up. So the kid, I forget his name, who was riding with me, I said, oh, I know that road, don't worry about it. I said, but you know, so I'm going slow, 4-wheel drive, but I put the left front wheel went off the little bridge. There's no guardrail. There's maybe 10, 12 feet high. I said, all right, well, unhook the trailer, push it back. I got it forward and I'll get it up. It didn't get up. It flipped over and me and the Jeep went down about 10, 12 feet.
You flipped over with the Jeep?
Yeah. So when I went, thank God, I went this way and the steering wheel, I got away from the steering wheel, I went on the other side. I got some black and blue marks, some scrapes, but now I get myself out of the Jeep. Now I can see the sergeant from the motor pool up above in a 3/4 with a winch on the front. He yelled down, once he found out I was all right, he started, chewing my ass out. But they tipped the Jeep back over and we got it up, they pulled it up. But nothing other than mine dents. But we hooked up the Jeep and I just took off and brought the ammo up. And I continued, doing my thing in the motor pool. They always wanted me to work on and I kept telling them I don't know anything about the engine. I wanted to get back to the platoon. I was doing everything to make him mad that he'd say, all right, you're not going to stay in the motor pool.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to the platoon. I don't want you. But no, they kept me in the motor pool. And where was it? Another time, same thing. There was smoke, and you're supposed to stop, not proceed. And I banged into a 2.5 ton parked truck. And not that there's any damage, but finally, the Jeep was M10. So every time I went by the checkpoints, I said, oh, here comes M10. Just flag him through so he don't get the next, it got to be a joke.
Yeah.
And, but I did all right. But then the ceasefire was coming. So we got word that tonight is ceasefire. So I didn't have to do anything that night. And then when the ceasefire came the next morning, I kept going up and we were hauling stuff down from the line. Now, we were 4 or 5 miles in front of the 38th parallel. So we only had like 3 or 4 days to, get everything out and then blow everything up. So that's all we did, was get rid of that line, come back to the new position, and set up a new line on the 38th parallel, which is still there today. Yeah, so that's what we did. So all we did was rebuild, digging trenches, sandbags, and but luckily I'm still in the motor pool, and even when we got the line done, even when the line was done, the 3rd Rock Division came in to relieve us, and we were going back down into Incheon. So all the guys get on 2.5 ton trucks, 3/4 tons. I had a couple of kids. I had 3 kids in my Jeep who did the washing, the cook, helping with the KP and all that stuff in my Jeep. Going back down, we went down through, I think we went down through Sewell into Incheon. And this big LST was there, and it was beached because when the tide went out, you couldn't go. So we had to get everything loaded up, and by the time we got that loaded up, the tide came in, and we boarded. So we put our trucks, Jeeps, my Jeep up on the LST. And then we went up on deck and just waited for the tide to come in. And then we went back to Japan. And for the next 7, 8, 9 months, whatever, we stayed in Japan. And that was about it.
So just kind of circle back to just some more specific questions. How often were you under shell fire, like artillery?
Every day.
Was it close or was it just
Well,
kind
one
of sporadic?
time, well, a couple of times. One time I was in front, in the trench in front of the gun position. I don't know what the hell we were doing. And I had one of these kids with me, Korean kids. And the shell came pretty close. When I turned around and I looked, he's got a big smile on his face. And I said, "What are you smiling at?" And he pointed up to the sandbag. And I looked, I took to my left, and there's a piece of shrapnel in the sandbag. Probably 2 feet away from my head.
Wow.
And I reached up and he would hurt my finger. How dumb was that? So I took out my bayonet and I cut it out. I kept that thing until I was rotated home like almost a year later. And then when I said, "What the hell did I keep?" I threw it away before I filled up my duffel bag to leave the post. Because even when I went down to the orderly room, my company commander says, "Do you realize you've been here over 2 years in this company?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "Don't you want to go home?" I said, "Yeah." But he was kind of joking about it. But I didn't realize I was in the company a little over 2 years, like 2 years and a month or something, yeah. All total, I was overseas 2 years, 1 month and 14 days I was overseas.
Wow.
And for an 18, 19-year-old kid, that was a long time to be away from home. But it didn't bother me like other kids that were there, my age or a year or two older, because I was never home anyway. I was in boarding homes and stuff like that. I lived with other people.
Yeah.
So that didn't bother me, no.
Now, what was combat like on a typical basis, on a day-to-day basis? Just, did you ever get fired upon by enemy fire, or just was it artillery, or?
The only thing we got fired on was artillery. There's 76 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
They had 76s, and that's the only thing that used to come in on us. And it'd be sporadic. Sometimes more in the morning, sometimes nothing in the morning. Same with the afternoon. Very little at night. In my position, a mile or two away, they were catching hell. On the ceasefire, the night of the ceasefire, a couple of miles down, they were fighting right up until the end, hand to hand. We had nothing.
Yeah.
We were pretty lucky.
Did your company have any casualties at all?
Oh yeah. There was these 2 kids. Well, now I'm 19. I'm 19. So now you got the other kids coming in. They're like 18. They came in the afternoon. That night, both of them were killed. Now the next morning, when this happened, I was in the motor pool.
Mm-hmm.
I brought them 2 kids down to the aid station to unload their bodies. I didn't even know who their names were.
Wow.
Yeah. Now when I went into the bunker, it was an aid station. That's where we brought them down.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this major in there working on one of our guys. I think he was an L company. And his whole up here was just off. You could see the bone. And he's laying on the stretcher there. And the major, as soon as I came in, he says, "Grab his ankle, pick him up." And I picked it up, his foot, so they could get this big ace bandage. And it sounded like Jello going together. But he was so high on morphine, he was smoking a cigarette.
Kidding me.
He didn't realize how bad he was. I said, and I'm looking, and then he said, "Okay, put his foot down." And I did. I got a little dizzy. And he says, "Well, just put him up against the bunker with the other bodies." That's what he told me. So I went out, and that's what we did. We put these two kids up against, they were wrapped in their blankets. And that was it. Another time, well, we had mistakes. There was this kid, he didn't realize we had Spanish kids in the squad. So when he heard them talking, he thought they were Korean, and he threw a hand grenade in the bunker. Well, thank God it didn't kill them, but they got wounded. That was, and they survived. Stuff like that. And then another time, our own fire, one of our own planes, they called in for support because they were coming in the valley to bomb them. Well, he got the long ridge. Instead of going across the valley and getting on their ridge, these were the prop planes. They weren't jets. He dropped a 500-pound bomb on us. So, on the number 1 gun and number 2 gun, this kid Cuate, he was Spanish, that's gun. His name was Gun, but we used to call him Cuate. That was, he got hit in the hand. He was the gunner. He get piece of shrapnel in the hand. And on number 2 gun, this Donald Broder. He was from Lowell, Mass. I knew him, and I hung out with his brother, Mike. But Mike caught measles and went back to Japan for having measles. And he got hit in the knee, smashed his leg up pretty good. And he was sent back to the States. But that stuff like that happened.
Now, what were like the conditions on the line? Like, where'd you sleep? Just on the ground, or?
No, in bunkers.
Bunkers?
Yeah.
What were the bunkers set up like? Were they concrete or dirt?
No, sandbags. Yeah, they're all sandbags, yeah. And comma wire, back and forth. And if you were lucky enough to have an air mattress, but they never worked because they all had holes in them. But whatever you could do, if you could find anything, cardboard or whatever, which was just not available. But yeah, that's how we lived. We lived in the bunkers. And we had sleeping bags. So, but everybody had the crabs because those sleeping bags, they kept switching. If you turned it in, they gave you another sleeping bag, they never cleaned that sleeping bag. You didn't know who slept in it before you.
But like lice?
Yeah. Well, they were crabs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just always itching and everything?
Oh, everybody had crabs.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not a good position.
How often did you were able to like shower and bathe and everything?
You could get back probably once a week. You get a shower and get clean fatigues, underwear. Yeah.
Now, what kind of equipment did you have with you? Like uniforms and stuff?
Fatigues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When we went over, we all had what we were wearing and one extra set. Yeah. In your backpack. And an extra couple of pair of socks, underwear, stuff like that. Yeah.
Now, what were like the food? What was the food like the rations?
Well, you could get a hot meal if you went back to battalion. But if it was raining, you had to sit outside in the rain. So I lived on K rations, C rations.
What were those like?
I used to like the franks and beans, the spaghetti, stuff like that. Yeah. They had crackers, a little pack of cigarettes with about 4 cigarettes in them, candy bar, stuff like that, yeah.
Did you smoke in those days?
No, I didn't smoke. No. But I used to give them to the other guys that did.
Yeah. What was like your most memorable experience in Korea that sticks to you?
Well, one time we had a 5-gallon can of water. Everybody was running out of water in their canteens. I was filling up their canteen cups. and then they take the canteen cup and pour it in their canteen.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm filling up the cups. A 76 round came in, probably 25, 30 yards away from us, went off. And all the dirt and dust and rocks and everything, blew over us. No shrapnel hit any one of the four or five of us standing around there. One piece hit the can that was pouring. And then after everything cleared up, we just joked about it. How lucky we were that nobody got hurt, except our goddamn can. Somebody says, yeah, but they hit the can. Yeah, but we joked about it. I don't ever remember getting bad or anything, ever. Everything that happened, someone would make a wisecrack about it, and you went along with it. You try to outdo him, what he said, stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned having like Korean kids around.
Oh yeah, we had them for everything. They do our laundry, they wash our clothes. We used them for ammo bearers. They used to put the A-frames on and carry up the 81 water rounds for us, stuff like that. Yeah, we kept them busy. And we gave them food. That's what they did it for.
Mm-hmm.
They'd work there, doing everything for us.
Did they ever get hurt or injured or anything?
One time, when we were pulling back from the line, the ceasefire.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was this, another ceasefire. Yeah, it was a ceasefire. When we were pulling back, going back to the secondary position, I had these 3 kids in the back of my Jeep. And every hour, you'd stop the column of trucks for 10 minutes. Everybody would get out, walk around, heavy water. So I left my grease gun on the seat and I walked away from the Jeep talking to the guys on the side of the road. And we heard a pop. And what happened was the kids in the Jeep, one grabbed the grease gun, the other one grabbed it by the barrel, and the other one had it, and he had his hand on the trigger, and the round went off. Because I always kept a round in my chamber. Well, he lifted the cover, and it went up, and it shot him dead center. So, I don't know if he ever lived or not, but they put him in an ambulance, and, and I do remember the kids fighting over his blanket and whatever the hell he had up into it.
Wow.
I mean, there was no sorrow or anything among them. And what happened was I was upset what happened because it was my weapon, but there was nothing I could do about it. And nothing was ever said. I never heard anything about it. But that's what happens over there. I saw other incidences like that to other people, but not to me. I mean, I still, like I'm talking to you today, but I think about that every now and then my whole life since I've come back.
Wow.
Yeah. If he lived or died, I don't know. Yeah.
Did you ever have any experiences with like enemy POWs or anything? Did you ever see any of them?
Yeah, we took in a couple one time, yeah. And then mainly, I went up, when I was in the motor pool, I took the first and second squad over to a new section of the line because there was a patrol going out to get prisoners and bring them back. And when they were coming back, the squad leader, he took off, he bugged out because they were shelling the hell out of him. What happened was we went in front of the line with the mortars, lining directly up on whatever they wanted to hit. And I went up the platoon, when I drove up to bring them back, the platoon sergeant, he was a master sergeant, he said, "You're taking them over the squad, get them out of here." So they loaded up into my Jeep, put the stuff in the trailer, and I drove them back to where we normally were. And the number 1 gun, number 2 gun got back in their positions. And and then the line companies came back and they had prisoners. And there was nobody no one got killed. It was successful. They did get a couple of prisoners. Yeah, I think it was L.K. company that we would support. But that was, we were credited for that, getting a couple of prisoners, yeah, M company.
Now, did you make any jumps in Korea?
No. One time we trained in Japan, when we first went back to Japan, we trained and trained and trained. And what we trained for was, we were gonna jump, secure this air base, and about a mile or 2 away there was a POW camp, and the line companies were gonna go up and get them, bring them back to the airport. M company, heavy weapons, machine guns, and mortars were given support and fire while they were loading up the POWs on the incoming planes. I was in the mortar platoon at the time. This is before I was put in the mortar pool. We had everything on us. We were heavily armed. I had a GP bag with a tripod for the mortar. Mm-hmm. So I would have been put in the door and just pushed out. And we're up in the plane, and we're probably 10 miles out from the drop zone. And we got a no jump. We got to turn the planes around. And everybody wanted to know why we're turning the planes around. And we were told that they knew we were coming, and we would have been, wiped out, I guess, if we had made the jump.
Wow.
So now we couldn't land the planes because we're overloaded. Because on my plane we had a Jeep. So what we did was we came back from the North Korea and back into South Korea, and we jumped, there. So we just scattered all over the place. But we were told when we got down that they had moved up a couple of divisions, and they knew we were coming, and it would have been not a good thing. So they called a jump off. And we were all mad because I wanted a star on my wings. And we trained hard in Japan for months but it wasn't to be. And not in my old age now, I'm kind of glad because that star wasn't that important. I'm back here alive, and we knew, it's funny, the feeling of a combat jump, I did get that before we got the no jump, I'm looking around the plane, nobody's talking, and everyone's probably thinking what I'm thinking. We knew everybody in this plane wasn't coming back. And that was the set mind of thinking. And they were all looking at everybody, and you weren't afraid, you weren't scared, but you just had this numb feeling that you were going to come back. And that was it. But I did, I wanted to make a combat jump. Never did.
Do you remember what that operation was called?
No, I don't. I forget what it was called.
Do you remember what time in what month that was around?
May or June. Oh, it's just before the ceasefire. Yeah.
Wow. Now, you guys have the ceasefire, and you guys load onto the ship. Then what happens? You go back to Japan, or?
We went back to Japan. The LST, yeah, we went back to Japan. And I stayed there because they didn't know if the war was going to start up again.
Mm-hmm.
So we stayed in Japan, and then every month or so, we'd go out what they call Maury up into the mountains and train for 30 days, and then come back into your camp. And we did this for about 8 months, and then I rotated back to the States.
What part of Japan were you in?
I was on the island of Kyushu in Beppu. It was a nice little town. And then people really didn't know there was a Second World War. All they had was a little little fighter base airport there on that island. And they didn't even know that there was a war. The people.
Wow. So when you rotated back home, how long were you in the Army before you got out?
I come back in October. Was it September or October? I only had to go another few months left in the Army. And I was stationed at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Yeah. And I was a cadre, training, new basic training, new recruits. And I had the physical station and the mortar station. Every day I go out, I get a different station. You give them the routine, what this is, what this does. And that's what I did for the time I was there.
Now, did you have any problems coming back, like adjusting back to once you got out of the Army?
When I got discharged out in the civilian life?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I did. I had no one to tell me what to do.
Did you ever deal with like any problems, just any, just like sleeping or anything like that, or?
Yeah, kinda, yeah, but I didn't know that anything was happening to me.
Yeah.
Just things were kind of mixed up. Like when I would go out and I would get on a bus, I couldn't stay on that bus. I had to get off. I just couldn't be enclosed with people. So I found out, I lived in South Boston, and every block there's a bar. So when I get off the bus, or if they walking down the street and I got nervous, I would just go to a bar, have a couple of beers, and I found out that helped me. I was, okay. And that progressed to where I depended on alcohol. And that was my problem. Yeah.
Now, what'd you do for work and everything after?
I was in the bar. I was in the Ace Cafe on Huntington Ave in Boston. And this guy, Dick Demers was his name. I don't know why I remember a name like that. He came in the bar and says they're hiring on the Mystic River Bridge, painters. $2 an hour. Well, all getting out of the Army, the Navy, the Marines. Earl was in the Marines. Bobby Pennell was in the Air Force. Bunch of us went over on the bridge. We all got hired. They told us to say that we were working for this contractor, that contractor, which we never did. And I was like 21. And no, I wasn't even 21 then. I turned 21 in June. I think we started in like May on the bridge, yeah. And then I started out as a painter on the Mystic River Bridge, doing all superstructure underneath the bridge on cable and chiggers. And you had to join the union. And That's how I became a union member and a painter, and that's what I did.
Now, did you ever keep in touch with any of your friends from the war?
No. One kid, one time came in from McGuinn. His name was McGuinn. He lived in New York. Yeah. And he took a bus in and stayed a couple of days with me. You know, I lived with my mother on Farragut Road at the time. And after he went back, we just fell out of touch. Yeah. And then, years later, I was married and had kids. And this, what the hell was his name? Al Poria from Lowell. I was in Danny's Cafe. I'm in there drinking, and he came in, and that's how we met. I looked down the bar, Al, you know, that kind of thing. Hey, Hogan. And that night, I drove back to Lowell with him, and I met the Broder, Mike Broder. We picked him up in a car, and another kid that lived in Lowell. And and somehow we got lost, and I ended up thumbing from Lowell back to Boston about 2 or 3 in the morning, looking for my car, and then I never seen him again. Never heard from him again. No.
How did you being in the service and like your experiences kind of affect your life afterwards? Think good or bad?
I think it helped me in a lot of ways. That I knew you had to be responsible. Even though you had people in the Army that you didn't like because they're telling you what to do and sometimes abused it. Well, you had the same thing in civilian life. You've got a foreman, no matter where you worked, he would have, he told you what to do, and he would abuse the authority sometimes. But in civilian life, sometimes you get in a fight with them. In the Army, you couldn't do that because of court-martials. You couldn't hit a sergeant, or you get, court-martialed. But in civilian life, you could hit a foreman, and nothing's going to happen except you're going to get fired. And I got fired many, many times. But that was due to my drinking. Yeah. I became independent on my drinking. I used to get up in the morning before going to work. I'd have to have a drink to calm my nerves to go to work.
Wow.
I depended on it. And it was, I abused alcohol. And that got me in a lot of trouble with my family, my friends, everybody. Yeah.
Now, how was your reception like when you came home and everything, like for like the Korean War vets? Because I know World War II had just gotten done with a couple years before that.
Well, when I got out, I was only 20 years old. Legally, I couldn't even drink. So I went into a bar to get a beer, and it come up that I was the conversation of this, that, and the other about the Second World War guys would be in there, and they were still talking about the Korean. The World War II guys would kind of say, that wasn't a war. And that's where the beef started. And the Korean vets weren't receptive, very good to the WW2 guys. Some did, some didn't care. But a lot of guys, you know, and I can understand their anger because they caught hell over there in WW2. No, but then as the years went by, that wore off. No one cared about me. No one cared about the World War II like today. Nobody cared about World War II.
I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Not really. I wish I didn't fall asleep on guard that one time.
Yeah, I noticed you have your paratrooper tattoo.
Oh yeah, I got that in Japan. And that happened, I got that just before we shipped back to Korea the second time.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it infected, and I got blood poison. And I got to go to the dispensary. And then I came back to the company. I had to spend a couple of nights there. And when it reported back into the orderly room, the first sergeant says, "You're up for a general court martial." I says, "For what?" He says, "Destroying government property." I said, "I ain't broke nothing." He says, "You got blood poisoning?" "Yeah." He says, "You're government property." Oh, gee. So now, a couple of days later, at 2 o'clock in the morning, orderly comes up, wakes everybody up. Fall out, full gear. Rifle, steel pot, the whole bit. And I says, "For what?" He said, "We're going back to Korea." I said, "I ain't going back to Korea. I'm up for general court martial." So I went down to the orderly room, and I told the first sergeant, you know. So he picks up the paper on the court martial, rips them up, and he says, "Get up there and get your gear and fall out." And I did. So that took care of that, yeah. For destroying government property, I didn't know. By getting that tattoo, being infected, I was ruining government property. And then I would be court-martialed. But I never did. I never got court-martialed, no.
Did it mess up the tattoo at all, getting blood poisoning? Or
No.
anything like that?
No. No. No, in the 3 years that I was in the Army, I never got court-martialed. I got out of a couple of court-martials for whatever, like, I was downtown one time in Beppu drinking. I was drunk. And they raided the place that I was in. And when I was in the dispensary and these MPs told me, "Pee in a jar," I'm peeing purple. And
Pee in purple?
yeah. So in the brig, in the guardhouse, whatever the hell you want to call it, they told me that I'm going to be court-martialed for drugs. I said, "I didn't take any drugs." So anyway, the analysis from my blood test and my urine test, wherever the hell they sent it, now I'm in there for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days waiting for the results. When it came back, I had drugs in me, but I had more alcohol. And the report came that I was a victim of circumstances, that somebody must have put drugs in my drink. Yeah. So again, I got out of another court-martial.
Did you ever get demoted or anything because of those? Or?
I was a corporal at the time. No. And even sleeping on guard, I was a corporal. And I didn't get busted. I never got busted.
Wow.
Those 2 times.
Did you get out as a corporal or sergeant?
I could have been sergeant because I was a squad leader. At the end, you know, when we got back to Japan, I got back into the platoon, got out of the monople. I was holding a position, and now that we're back in Japan, they changed it. Now, if we stayed in Korea, and I was squad leader, and there was an opening for staff sergeant. I wasn't just been made staff sergeant, but now that we're back in Japan, you had to go to this class and take a test. Well, not finishing the 7th grade, I couldn't read good and I couldn't spell good. So when I looked at the test, I just didn't do it. So the first sergeant says, Hogan, nobody gets 0 on a test. I said, well, I didn't take it. So he went down the whole list. I got like a 99 on the test, orally. So, but they couldn't do anything that way, you know.
Yeah.
So this other kid, he was a gunner in the other squad. He was corporal. And they made him. He used to be my assistant gunner. He's a color kid, a good kid. And he made staff sergeant. Now, he's staff sergeant. They put him in my squad and moved me back to gunner, which I was happy as a gunner. No responsibility. Yeah. But yeah, that happened. And that's the only time it really bothered me that I could have been a staff sergeant. And because of my education, I never made it. Not having an education. At Fort Dix, I was given an indirect order for my platoon sergeant to get a haircut. Well, I went home to Boston that weekend. And when I reported back Monday, I was supposed to have a haircut. Well, I got a haircut. I got a trim. So when I reported back Monday morning, I fall out, the platoon sergeant says, didn't I tell you to get a haircut? I said, I got a haircut. He said, that's not a haircut. So he, under Article 15, he brought me in for an indirect order, because he's a sergeant. He can't give me a direct order, only an indirect order, for not getting a haircut. Well, the company commander was away on a furlough, 5-day furlough, 10-day furlough, whatever. And the exec officer was a warrant officer at the time, a Mr. Miller. And he came, I went, reported it to him, and the platoon sergeant gave his story, and I said, I got a haircut, but I said, I'm getting discharged in 6 or 7 days, 7 or 8 or whatever. And I said, I'm not going out of here looking like a recruit. And he says to me, well, I have to go by what he says. And he says, but as a non-com, you've got a right to a court-martial. I said, no, I'm not going there. I says, I'll take the one grade deduction. So he says, okay. Under Article 15, 1 grade deduction. And that's it. So I got busted. The only time I ever got busted. A little over a week before discharge. For supposedly not getting a haircut. I could have taken a court-martial and beat it. But I would have had to stay beyond my discharge date. And there's no way I was going to stick in the Army any more than I had to at that point. Because it just got too chicken for me. Yeah. I was a field soldier. I did great out in the field. I'm not a garrison soldier. So that kind of pissed me off. That night at 2 o'clock in the morning, the orderly's up there waking me up. I said, what the hell are you waking me up for? He said, you're going on KP. I says, corporals don't pull KP. So I didn't go on KP. I fell out in the morning for a reveille. And he says to me, Hogan, why ain't you on KP? I says, because I'm a corporal sergeant. Until I see those general orders on the bulletin board, I'm a corporal. Well, he was pissed off. So the next morning, again, the orderly's waking me up. I get the hell out of here, you know, a few other words. I fell out, and he says, no. Well, the next morning, I fall out, and he says, why ain't you on KP? I says, because I haven't seen my, he says, go look at the bulletin board. Well, he must have hand carried my orders. They're on the bullet, I go in, Hogan. Corporal John J. Hogan, Jr. Under Article 15, recruits to the grade of PFC, Private First Class. I go, son of a bitch. And the right eye went over here. Special orders. John J. Hogan, Jr., Private First Class. Starts 0800 for discharge. You know what I did? I'm in fatigues. I went upstairs, took my fatigues off, put my civvies on, went over to eat breakfast in the mess hall in civvies. Now he's in there. He comes over to my table. What are you doing in civvies? I'm processing for discharge, Sergeant. And that's how my last few days was.
You had the last word.
Yeah, well, I couldn't get out. I said, but I'm not going to do nothing for him to bring me up on charges, you know? Yeah, no. I smiled at him and yesed him and yeah. You're a great guy, Sergeant, yeah. If you're ever in Boston, come and visit me. I'll take care of you.